Well, good morning once again. It's Thursday morning, the day we call Maundy Thursday, the day we remember Jesus at Last Supper with his disciples, where he took bread and he took wine and he shared it with them and gave it new meaning. That's recorded in Matthew, Mark and Luke, but it's not in John. John's gospel is different. John doesn't do sacraments. You won't find Jesus' baptism recorded in John, and you won't find the Last Supper. Instead, what you have in its place is the washing of the disciples' feet. And we're going to read that together now. We'll find it in John chapter 13 from verse 2. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he'd come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel round his waist. After that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel as that was wrapped round him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you should never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath need only wash their feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said, "Not every one of you is clean." When he'd finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Why is it that John records this event rather than the sharing of bread and wine on that Thursday evening? Maybe it's because at that time the sacraments had already begun to be superstitious. John's writing his gospel later than the other three. And maybe by that time people were starting to see baptism as the means of salvation, or taking communion regularly as the means of salvation. And though that is not the biblical view, it's not the ritual, but the reality behind it which is important. And that's what John wanted to convey. And so instead of the Last Supper, John writes this account of the washing of the disciples' feet. These two events took place together, we can be sure of that. But that's what John wants to focus on. He wants to focus on what Jesus did. Jesus gets up from the meal, takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, fills a basin with water and goes round washing the disciples' feet. And he talks about how that represents them being clean. If we look at that, you can see the gospel story. You can see Easter represented. Jesus gets up from the table, he takes off his outer robe and wraps a towel around his waist. That speaks of the incarnation, of Jesus stepping down to be one of us, laying aside something of his glory to become one of us. And then he takes the towel and he washes the feet of the disciples. And that talks about the crucifixion. That talks about the transference of dirt from us to him. And then at the end, when he's finished, he gets back up and he puts his outer garments on again. And that talks about the resurrection, of being raised and ascending to be at the right hand of the Father. This is a picture of the gospel, of the one who transferred the dirt from us to himself and made us clean. That's the reality behind the ritual. Let's think upon that over this day.